another Hstl&Hrt webinar as part of Women Fest, our month-long celebration of all things women, and is also Women's History Month. So who knew? Definitely didn't know that when I planned this. I would love to thank every one of you for coming and watching this afterwards. And I really want to thank and welcome our two panelists, Olivia Ling, who is a serial entrepreneur. Hello, welcome. Are we doing your formal introduction? Thank you for being here. And Bridgette Jackson, thank you also for being here. Bridgette's the founder of Equal X's. And let's just go straight into the intros. I'm doing this backwards. So Bridgette, like we said, is the founder of Equal X's. She is an experienced entrepreneur with many years in the public eye and within the women's health space. On top of that, Bridgette is a divorce and settlement expert, a CDC certified divorce separation coach, qualified lawyer, wow, and also has a post-grad dispute resolution qualification, and you're a certified mediator.
Yes.
Bloody hell, Bridgette. Welcome.
Yes, I like studying and learning, you see. Yeah.
We're thrilled to have you. And heading back on over to Olivia. Olivia is a multi-talented serial entrepreneur who is a strong believer in empowering a generation of young, socially responsible entrepreneurs, which we all need in this world. She's a strategic thinker focused on planning for the future of business and creating dynamic, creative workplaces for employees, again, which we all need. Olivia understands building a brand and, on top of that, corporate social responsibility, which are all critical to success. Olivia is also a public speaker and a philanthropist. Amazing. Hello, Olivia. Welcome.
Hello, Betty. Hi,
Amazing.
Hi.
Where were you 2 years ago when I needed you?
Oh, yeah, I know, exactly. Or you can always get married again, and then I could help you.
Sitting there thinking, where was she 10 years ago?
Yeah, I've lost count of how many people have asked me that. Why weren't you around to help me? Yeah.
I love it. And you know, really getting into it as well, like with our first sort of question, I'd love for you, if you can share with us your personal experiences on separation and divorce and how you came into helping other people with this. And we'll start with you, Bridgette, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I set up this business because I want people to not go through what I went through. I went through a very high conflict divorce. My husband and I were entrepreneurs. We had businesses. And I just was not happy in the relationship. You know, there was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of controlling, a lot of manipulating. And one day I just snapped. You know, I just thought, I can't cope with this anymore. I've got 4 children. I had 4 children within about 5.5 years. And so, that was it. I was done. I mean, women tend to leave a marriage emotionally 2 years before they leave physically. And that was certainly me, absolutely me, even a longer period of time. So we separated in August 2014, and he wouldn't sign a settlement agreement until the 3rd of October 2019. So it took 5 years to get a relationship property settlement, which cost me $500,000. And the emotional toll was massive in terms of that. And in the middle of that, our daughter, who was at that stage 13, got a random virus and nearly died and had to have a heart transplant. And I was left in hospital, you know, on my own, looking after her for a number of months. And, you know, the biggest thing for me is the strength and resilience that I have gained from that. And that's what I pour into my clients with my business. I remember one day in the hospital, Starship Hospital, when she was sick, sitting in the kitchen of the ward going, and I just felt this overwhelming sense of strength come over me. And it's never left me. You know, it's never left me. And really, what challenges for me used to be a 10 out of 10 are now a 1 out of 10. And so I love doing what I'm doing. I'm very passionate about it. I do a fantastic job for people, helping them move through the story of divorce to the business of divorce. The other day I got a testimonial, and I worked with the husband and wife, and they said, "You've changed our lives," you know? And I get emotional because, in a good way, because making a real difference in people's lives as they go through one of the most stressful times, top of the stress continuum, is an amazing feeling. And so many people need their hands held. You know, they need a sounding board, a thinking partner to help them through the process, the legal, the financial, the parenting, the well-being, and their new beginnings.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And what a journey, and for you to come full circle with that, such strength as well, that you can help deliver to your clients, because they can see that you've been through that, come through on the harrowing other side of it with all of this strength and purpose.
Yeah, no, I feel very fortunate. My mantra is there's always a positive and a negative. You've just got to find it. You know, that there is always the negativity, the negative things challenges that you go through. There is something positive that comes out of that. So just find it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. And Olivia,
Pleasure.
we'd love to hear your story as well.
Okay. Like Bridgette, I also have 4 children, and I was divorced about 10 years ago. I think what's important for me to mention today is that it actually took me a good 5 or 10 minutes to think about whether or not I would do the speaking engagement. And the reason being, because I'm from an Asian background, it can be quite different and quite difficult to talk about these topics.
Wow.
And yeah, so I think it's very important. You know, I thought about it after 5 or 10 minutes. I thought, if I can share a little bit of my journey, and if I can show people the more vulnerable, the more difficult side of things that I've been through, and yet, you know, come through it on the other end, hopefully that will give people a little bit of strength to feel better about the choices that they may need to make in their own lives. Like Bridgette, it was a situation where it wasn't an immediate decision for a very sudden divorce. I think she was very correct in the sense that for women, I think emotionally you do check out a lot earlier than before you physically do. I think we tend to hold on for lots of different factors and not want to give up in a sense, you know, for many, many different factors. For me, ultimately, I stayed for longer than I should have in my marriage. And the reason I stayed was for my children. And this was the advice, the pressure that I was getting from the society that I was in, culturally, from family, was to stay, because the important thing is the children and keeping the family unit together. And then ironically, when people ask me what eventually helped me make that decision to leave, I actually left for the children. And that's something that people find very difficult to understand. And I think if I was to make that decision to leave for myself, it would have been that much harder. You feel duty bound, you feel a sense of responsibility. So when you try to put yourself first in a lot of situations, that can be quite difficult for some women. So for me especially. And ultimately, the reason why I found the strength to leave and found the strength to end my marriage was because of my 4 children. Because I woke up one day and I realized that they were not in a healthy environment. They were not in a happy marriage. And this was the last thing that I wanted to teach my 4 children. I have 2 sons and I have 2 daughters. And I did not want my sons growing up thinking that this is the way a woman is treated in a marriage. And even more importantly, I also didn't want my daughters to feel that, you know, this is the role model that they had, you know, this strong entrepreneur of a mum, yet mum puts herself, you know, second, puts her needs second, third, fourth. And I thought to myself, I had to think really long and hard. I looked in the mirror and realized that's the role model I'm giving them. I'm teaching them that what they want, what is important to them is of no value. Their happiness is of no value. So when I realized that it was a terrible teaching curve that I was on with the children. And then I also realized that they had 2 parents that had mentally checked out.
Yeah.
We're not only checked out of the marriage, but we checked out of family life because we couldn't handle it. We couldn't handle the togetherness. We couldn't handle being together and not having like fights and arguments in front of the children. So we just opted out. And for me, I just threw myself into work. So that decision one day that really the kids needed to come first, and this, you know, marriage that wasn't functioning, this very, very dysfunctional situation that we had, was in fact more detrimental to the children than us staying and having this outwardly perfect family, you know, intact family, like people like to say, like a perfect unit that really wasn't functioning. So that was really what gave me the strength, you know, the love for my children and wanting to put them first was actually what helped me to make that decision to leave.
I totally agree. One of the reasons I left is because my son, who was 12, I've got 2 sons and 2 daughters as well. My son was beginning to act like my ex-husband towards me, you know, so I totally get it. And also people think that the children don't actually feel the tension when their parents are in a relationship that's not serving them well, but unfortunately they do. They pick it all up.
They do. Like, me and my ex-husband had made a conscious decision that we weren't going to fight in front of the children. There wasn't going to be a lot of drama in front of the kids. There wasn't going to be throwing of things, breaking of things, shouting, screaming, slamming of doors. So they saw none of that. But that's only one type of violence and hostility, you know. Children are very sensitive, and they pick up on all sorts of other cues. The fact that two people ignore each other, the fact that two people don't function properly, no conversations going on at the dinner table, you know, no love being shown, no affection being shown. All this affects children, and they pick up on it. And heaven forbid they start thinking that that's, you know, normal family life, and they learn that.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree
Wow.
more.
I mean, I just think all of it's really admirable, and the fact that both of you as well have done this for yourselves, but also to set an example for your kids. Because so interesting, Bridgette, that you're just saying about your son and modeling that behavior already. How would you say that you've mentioned that women check out emotionally 2 years before they actually leave physically? Well, they leave emotionally 2 years on average before they leave. How do you think, in both of your experiences, that men and women handle divorce and separation differently?
Oh, in many cases. I mean, that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, really is very appropriate in terms of divorce and separation. You know, one of the aspects is a lot of men don't like going to counselling. And my ex-husband said he'd rather leave than go to counselling. And that, you know, that broke my heart, because I'm certainly not pro-divorce. I want people to ensure they can make the marriage work, having no regrets. Not all marriages obviously are going to work, but you've actually got to give it energy. You've both got to really want that marriage to work, all right? But you know, there are obviously irreconcilable differences that not all marriages work, but generally men and women deal with relationship breakdowns quite differently. People act in ways that are strange and weird, that they don't act like normally, right? There's a number of emotions going on up and down. The fact that it's like a tornado, a tsunami, a roller coaster ride, they're all very apt at describing the process. Okay. And I also say to my clients, particularly if one person has decided to leave the relationship and the other one was unaware that anything was wrong, for example, it's like running a race. So the person who has decided to end the marriage has already passed the finish line of the race, whereas the person who was unaware of the situation, to the extent of the other ex-partner, is still getting off the start line, which means that there's different emotions going on for different people at different times. Okay.
Yeah,
for me,
that
I
makes
think
sense.
the big difference is, I think from my point of view anyway, when women can see that there's problems and there's issues, I think we do try in our way to deal with it. Like Bridgette was mentioning, like maybe counseling or talking or trying to work through the problems. And I think I mean, I can't speak for all men in general, but, you know, what I noticed, you know, the difference between the way I dealt with things and the way my ex-husband dealt with things was I was trying during the process, like during this race that you're talking about, you know, during this unfortunate race to this finish line that I really wasn't hoping to reach. I had been bringing up the issues, trying to talk about things, trying to force a point, trying to explain how serious this was and the direction things were going in. But I think for him, he was just very confident that nothing was going to change, very confident that there wasn't going to be an issue, that everything would sort itself out without putting any effort in and without changing things. And to his credit, I mean, he did try, but that came far too late. You know, I'd already passed the finish line and emotionally had already made a decision that I was, you know, that it wasn't going to work anymore. And only then, you know, then the truth, the honesty, the wanting to work things out. But I think it came at a far too late a point. So I think it's important to have people like Bridgette come in on the process much earlier. You know, having a neutral third party discuss things with people, I think can be a lot better well received by both parties. Sometimes when it's just the two parties that are involved and there's a lot of emotions running high, no one's really listening to the other party. So having a third party sitting there and, you know, holding a mirror up and letting you see your own own behavior, and you're also seeing the behavior of your partner and how serious that behavior might be. You know, the fact that the person's shutting down, the person is emotionally retreating. All those things are so important, and sometimes it takes a third party to highlight that. And I think again, culturally, that is quite difficult for a lot of Asian women. It's quite difficult to discuss things in public. It's quite difficult, the idea of going to a counselor, not just for men in our culture, I think for women as well.
Oh, absolutely. And in that regard, Olivia, I'm going to be working with a Chinese woman in this space to help Chinese women and men overcome those issues that they've got in their marriages, or as you were talking about, there's a great stigma attached in your community in terms of getting divorced. So that is going to be definitely a focus for me over the next few months and beyond, is to help this people in this space. Okay.
Very important, because, you know, then not everybody, and at the same as you, I'm not pro-divorce at all. I never thought it was going to happen to me. Yeah. So I think it's very important, you know, to have somebody like you, you know, and have platforms like, you know, what Betty is providing, so people can maybe have some sort of intervention at an earlier phase before, you know, the two parties become so separated that they're just two ships passing in the night. I think if, you know, you have this third party intervention earlier, there's probably a lot more chance of reconciliation and a lot more chance of moving forward together.
Yeah. If people come to me and they're on the fence about leaving, we do some coaching. Should I stay? Should I go? You know, what do you want to preserve in the relationship? What needs to be taken out of the relationship? And then if they decide they want to separate, because they get some clarity after that coaching, then we actually prepare them for separation before they actually leave. It's like a job. It really is like a job. You have to, you know, focus on the financial aspects of it, the legal aspects. How are we going to parent? Do we need a parenting plan? Are we going to co-parent? Are we going to parallel parent? What's that going to look like? And then moving on to your well-being, self-care. Are you looking after yourself? Are you sleeping or eating? Have you got support? Right down to what career are you going to do now? What is your purpose in life? What's your identity? Who are you now that you're not having to be somebody you're not in a relationship that wasn't serving you well? So it's the whole gamut, the whole facet of the journey.
Yeah, and there's so many aspects of it that you're touching on, and I want to touch on as much of that as we can in this sort of 40 minutes that we have left. But I'd love to talk as well, you know, you talk about third parties getting involved early enough, and I'm guessing from that could be mediation or coaching. Bridgette, can you just talk us through what mediation means? Can people do it, like separate just through mediation? Do you need a lawyer, etc.?
So I do a lot of informal mediations with people to work through their custody and relationship property matters. So what mediation is, a mediator is an impartial person who you meet with and helps you work through decisions and offers up solutions, brainstorms in terms of the issues that you have. It's the decision is not binding on both of you, which is different to arbitration, for example. So if there's no result or no agreement, then that's the end of it. But it's a really fantastic way for people who are amicable enough to be able to work through the process. In the first instance, what I do is I do some pre-coaching with the individuals involved, and we talk about moderating behavior. We talk about flexible thinking. And one of the biggest things when you're going through this process is managing your emotions. So we do a lot of pre-coaching in relation to that. We then have an agenda and we work through all the issues. We come up with solutions. We brainstorm what is going to be fair for both of you. In terms of lawyers being involved in this process, I always like, because I am a qualified lawyer, but I've got a code of ethics. I'm their divorce coach, not acting in the capacity of their family lawyer. So the partners go off and get some legal advice to make sure they're informed and educated. We sit down and we write down a list of questions, what they need to ask, what's pertinent in relation to their situation. I give them a document entitled You and Your Lawyer, questions to ask yourself before you go to a lawyer, and questions for the lawyer, because you've got to make sure, just in case anything happens down the track, you need a lawyer who has got the right style and the right approach for you. You know, you need someone who is, if you're amicable couples, you want to ensure that you don't have someone on board your team who's going to escalate the conflict. okay, or has a different strategy, court, for example. So then at the end of the process, the mediation process, once people have agreed to their custody and relationship property issues, we then bring the lawyers back in. There's a settlement agreement that's developed, and both parties have an independent lawyer who signs off on that agreement, because you only get one chance at settling your settlement agreement, all right? They're very difficult to overturn unless there's duress, for example. So the biggest thing also I tell clients is, if you've both come away slightly unhappy in terms of the shared marital asset split, then it's a good result for both of you.
Yeah, wow. And Olivia, did you go down the mediation route, or were you saying that's something you'd wish you'd had?
I wish I would have had that option, because I think that, as Bridgette was mentioning, during the mediation process, it can you might be in a situation where you're still somewhat amicable. What I noticed in my divorce proceedings, and also in many of the divorce proceedings of people that have been close to me, is that the acrimony and the amount of negativity really escalates during the process itself, during the divorce process. So by the end of it, yes, you've had a very acrimonious divorce, and you've had a very litigious, very difficult few years, but that's not necessarily the point that you started at. I think it's just, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of, you did this, so I'm going to do that. You asked for this, so I'm not going to give you that. And it becomes that down the road. Whereas I think if you can sit down at the beginning with a mediator, even if you choose not to continue in the marriage, I think you are going to be in a much more amicable space. I think if I had had a situation like that, I think it would have served actually me and my ex-husband both very well. We most probably, in retrospect now, I understand that we most probably still would have ended up separating and divorcing, because essentially I think we're very different people, and our value system is quite different, and our ideas about parenting are quite different. But the process wouldn't have been as painful on either of us if we had gone through that route. And I do really feel very, very sorry, and have a huge amount of compassion for my family lawyer who dealt with our divorce, because this poor chap had to be everything. He had to be mediator, counselor, flag waver, everything. And that really was
coach. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, and behavior was not particularly stellar in the lawyer's office, because that's where we chose to air all our grievances, because we were no longer living together, we were no longer speaking, and we were no longer amicable with each other. So it was these lawyers' meetings, which really was to determine more important aspects of the divorce, that became just, I need to air my grievances. I need to tell you what you did to me and how it made me feel. And that happens in the lawyer's office, which is not the right place, not the right space, and you're not going to get the support and the help that you need to actually work through things. In a mediation situation, or even an arbitration situation, or a coaching situation, or counseling situation, I think we could have probably gotten to the base of what was upsetting each other a lot better.
Yeah, and I say to my clients, when you're going through this process, you want to look back in 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, and think, I acted in my best self. I've got no regrets, because I managed my emotions, and I acted in a way that's been beneficial for our relationships as co-parents and our children and wider family. Yeah.
I think the other point that Bridgette made that was very important is that when you do see a coach or a counselor, you are told about the hurdles that are coming up that you have not thought about, because these are not things. Most people, some unfortunate people have been through it more than once, but most people, when you have a divorce, you're facing this for the very first time. And if you don't have a support network of people around you who understand the process, you're not going to know what's coming up. And what Bridgette said about having the coaches there, and then sitting down and telling you what's going to come up, how you're going to feel, the things you have to work through. For me, it was just like landmine after landmine after landmine. I was dealing with this one problem, but I never thought, okay, well, 5 months down the track, I have to think about this. How are we going to do this with the children? How are we going to parent? All these things were just like curveballs flying in through the night, and just more and more difficult situations and like minefields to kind of navigate through. Whereas if you knew they were coming and you planned for them and had some idea about how you were going to cope and what decisions you were going to make, I think you could manage the whole process in a much more positive way.
Absolutely. When I take couples on at the start of the process, it's a very intense time. I might end up with 20 phone calls from each of them per day, because it's so raw and the emotion is so high. So for me, a lot of that is, and then it dies down over the time period because people are able to manage their emotions and really, okay, I've got to avoid these pitfalls and these mistakes, and we've got a goal, and this is our goal, is to get successful outcomes in terms of custody and the relationship property and all the other outcomes that we want flow from there. So that is very intense, and then which, as you say, Olivia, can end up in litigation quickly, because when it comes to the money, it can easily go to custody. And that's why I talk about making sure that you've got a lawyer who has got the same approach as you. There is a small amount of lawyers that fuel the conflict. If they know there's a lot of money at stake, it doesn't matter to them. They don't care about the emotional toll that it takes on people. If they know they could drag it out by just writing letters for a year or two. I mean, that's what happened to me. Mine was dragged out, and I just never want anyone to go through the experience that I went through. It was just horrendous.
Yeah, I can't believe lawyers do that. That's just, it gives everybody a bad name. Why? I mean, they want to make more money, right? And that's why they would do that. But yeah, and how do you go about finding somebody that does, like a lawyer that does have the same values as you? Because if I'm about to go through a divorce, I don't know where the heck to look, right?
Yeah, that's right. You've got no idea. And friends and family, they can be fantastic, but they also can be the worst advice to go, to talk about these issues with, because someone might say, go and see that lawyer, but your scenario might be completely different to whoever saw that lawyer. So I work with a panel of lawyers who I know are going to do a really cost-effective job for clients and get the job done and are on the same page as the client. So I send clients to a couple of lawyers, and then they make a decision about which one they feel comfortable with after asking these questions. How much do you cost? What is your style? What is your approach? How would you? All of those questions are really important, and that doesn't happen a lot. I get a lot of clients who I need to swap lawyers, because they're just not getting they're not being heard. They're not a priority for the lawyer. Wow. They're not meeting their needs. They're not giving them a strategy, a roadmap of what it's going to look like, what the journey is going to look like.
I think an important part of it is when you're sitting with your lawyer and discussing the issues, that you don't feel pressured into making a decision, that ultimately the decision is yours. That's how you know that you're probably with the right lawyer. I mean, they have to have your best interests at heart, and they have to fight hard for you and what it is you've decided you want. But ultimately, you can't be pushed into making that decision, because that is not their role.
That's right. Absolutely. Totally.
Yeah, that all makes entire sense. And when it comes to divorce and separation, what would you both say is the biggest misconception about it?
The biggest misconception, well, there's a number, but so a lot I get in terms of economic disparity. So the misconception is I was the breadwinner, so I deserve more. Okay, so economic disparity, actually there's always someone who's the caregiver for the children if there's children in the relationship, and they have sacrificed their life or a number of years, 15, 20 years, looking after the children. Where would their career have been had it not been that they had looked after the children? So that's the Scott versus Williams case. And there's a lot of, it's quite a grey area, and it puts the, cat among the pigeons for a lot of people, because there's a lot of people who have been the high earner who don't believe that their partner is on the same level of them financially, should be seen at that level because they've been looking after the children. But looking after the children is as important as someone going out and working. I see a lot of women who have been at home for 15, 20 years. They haven't worked. If they go back into the workforce, they'll have to go and work in a retail store earning $20 an hour, something in that regard. So that's one of the misconceptions that quite a few people going through divorce have, who are the earning partner.
Interesting. Yeah, well, that's you're right though. I think that there's definitely not enough given to women that are staying at home. You're right, you've given up your life to do that. And would you agree with that, Olivia? Is that something that you've experienced as well, or?
I'm lucky in the sense that I was able to work. I worked throughout my motherhood, throughout my marriage, and that is not a part of me that I was lucky enough to not have to put that on a side bench while I was bringing up my children.
Amazing.
So for that, I have personal experience, but I definitely agree the opportunity cost of staying home and looking after the children is not something that should be slighted. I think, you know, a lot of women come from very good educational backgrounds. You know, they can be qualified lawyers, qualified accountants, you know, all sorts of things. Not that those are the two only important fields, but there's just too many to mention. And that does get put on the side burner to bring up children. So I was lucky enough, you know, in the sense that I had a village around me that helped me with childcare and helped me bring up the kids. And I was able to build my career and bring up the kids at the same time. For me, I think it might be a cultural thing again, but the misconception about divorce and you know, a marriage breaking up, I think is that I think there is a big feeling that you can't have it again. You know, that it's difficult to move forward, and it's difficult to, once you've kind of broken it and once you've had that chance, it's kind of over for you. And I think that's something that's quite prevalent in my community, that kind of feeling. And I think it's important for women to know that that's not it, you know. I mean, the title of today's conversation is exactly it. You know, you're divorced, you haven't died. You know, it's part of you that has had to come to an end because it didn't work. But that's not all of who you are. You know, for me, a huge part of me that consumes every waking moment of my life is being a mom. You know, that is a huge part of me that I could never divorce from. But the marriage itself, it was very, very sad and heartbreaking that it ended for me. And I think growing up, never thinking that it would happen to me, that was a big shock as well. But it's definitely something you move on from. And you may not, you know, you may not have another situation that is completely traditional again. It may be, a lot of people do have very traditional arrangements going forward. It may not be, but you create and you build another life. And it doesn't mean that, you know, having one shot and failing at it or not, you know, or deciding to exit from it means that it's over. I really don't think that. I think you are still the same person you were before, maybe just a bit wiser, a bit smarter, but you've still got a lot to give. There's still a lot of love in you. There's still that same person that wants to be nurturing and loving and be part of a family unit, but it just may not look as traditional on the, you know, on the face of it as it was the first time around.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where you're turning the negative into a positive. So with your new beginnings, you've got a new opportunity. You've got an opportunity to be the person you want to be and live the life you want to have, you know, and go out there and
a wiser way. And I think you understand yourself a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you become, and particularly women, for example, will touch on the financial literacy, you know, literacy. A woman can learn to manage their finances, because I see a lot of women who are not able to manage their finances, have no idea about finances as they go through the process, well, even in the marriage and after. It's an opportunity for you to actually put yourself first and heal and get yourself well again in all aspects, and become a new you, a better improved you. I mean, for example, I found that I was actually a better parent when I was separated than when I was in the relationship.
Yeah, and it may not even be a new you. What I discovered was it was the old me. You know, it was the old
me.
That's right. Back, but in a better, smarter, stronger way. And that me had kind of like disappeared, and that me had lost my identity and lost, you know, to who I was. You know, was just going through the motions, doing what I thought was, you know, what I was duty bound to do, what I should be doing. And I kind of lost sense of me. So in a way, it's a new me, but it's also the old me that I reached, you know, in a smarter, more positive way. And now I'm a lot more clear about what I'll put up with, what my limits are, where my boundaries are. And I'm also a lot clearer about what makes me happy. And I think that's, you know, a key part. I know this sounds very strange, especially for those people who went through the journey with me, but I think I'm a lot happier now than I ever could have been in that situation. You know, even if certain aspects of what led to the end of marriage hadn't occurred, I think I'm still happier now.
I would agree with that. I would agree.
I'm sure everyone would love hearing this, because it all sounds like doom and gloom. And that's definitely what this was about. And, you know, I also wanted to touch on as well, like when it comes to your well-being, just as you're going through it, because I want to talk about the other side for sure, but just like, how can women look after their mental health when they're going through divorce and separation? And what's the best way to do that?
Okay, from my perspective, I'm always telling clients if they need it, they've got to go and see a psychologist or a counselor on a regular basis. They need that support. Also, it's very important to have support of your family and friends. Like my mother died a number of years ago, but my father has been incredible to me as I go through the process. I've been ringing him up at 1 a.m. in the morning and going, I can't do this anymore, you know. And so he was fantastic. And it comes back to the fundamentals of sleeping well. I've got an Aura ring, so you know that helps you sleep well, eating properly, exercising, all of those things to make yourself feel good. Take time out to lie on your bed and read a book, or go and have a massage, or go to the gym. Do some things for yourself. You know, you need to really focus on making yourself feel well again. Surround yourself with people who really love and nurture and care for you as you do for them, and that's a really important piece as well.
Yeah,
for me,
I love that.
family and friends were really key. I am the opposite of Bridgette. I lost my father before my divorce, but I've had my mom, and my mom has been a rock. You know, she's like co-parented the children with me. You know, she's lived with me in like a extended family situation. So it's been very important to have that support. And right from the very early stage of understanding that the marriage was ending, my mom was hugely supportive of whatever decision I made. You know, she had her own opinions as to what I should do. And those did kind of leak out at times. But ultimately, she let me decide whether I was going to stay or whether I was going to leave. You know, she was actually pro me moving on with my life and ending things. But she kept that, she tried to keep that under wraps, and she tried to really, really allow me to make my own decision, give me that space. And when I did finally make the decision to leave, she was hugely supportive of it. Has been like a huge rock for me and the 4 kids. And I think my circle of friends suddenly became very tight, you know, suddenly became very protective, and they were there for me all the time, and they know who they are. You know, they were there with me every moment of every day. You know, they makes me teary just thinking about it, but they really, really were. They became everything to me, and they became everything to the children. So the children never felt like this emptiness. You know, if anything, this huge village kind of rallied around them, and the kids never even realized, the little boys especially, because they were so young when it happened. They're only 9 and 10 now. So, and my divorce happened very soon after my youngest son was born. So they just rallied, and they have this huge village around them, you know, of support and love and care. And I think a big part of what has been important for the kids is still having access to their father, so not being cut off from him, and knowing that they can see him and access him and be with him whenever they want to. That's been a big part of keeping them solid, you know, which in turn keeps me happy, because I know that they're well balanced and all their emotional needs are being taken care of. And for me, I didn't have access to therapy or counseling or anything like that. So I had to figure out, you know, what was going to work for me. And I found my old love, which was, you know, exercising and you know, boxing and going to the gym. And so that's something that I'd stopped for a very long time. And I started again, and it just gave me this huge strength, and it was something for me, and it works for therapy for me. But yeah, it's important. You need an outlet. You need some sort of outlet. You need family that there for you, that support you. You need friends who are there and who are willing to help and willing to listen and willing to scrape you off the floor when you're at your lowest. And I think that's the healthiest way to move forward.
So Olivia, have you got 50-50 custody of your children? How does that work for you?
I actually, in the end, I approached the situation very much like a business negotiation, because everything had just gone completely out of hand. And we were using the lawyer's office as, you know, counseling, as all sorts of things, as mudslinging, as screeching, as table thumping, all sorts of nonsense going on. So I had to take a deep breath, sit back down and just think, okay, well, who am I? Okay, I'm a mother and I'm a businesswoman. Like, how am I going to deal with this? And how am I going to get what I want from this and what I need from this? And I, in the end, approached it very much like a negotiation. So in a negotiation, you have your non-negotiables. You have to be willing to give up when things you're willing to work on, and then you have your 100% non-negotiables. And for me, for various reasons I don't need to get into here, custody was non-negotiable. It had to be full custody with me. So that's what I gave up. A lot of other things on the table. I negotiated a lot of things, gave up a lot of things along the way. But the one thing for me that was non-negotiable with the children were to stay with me, full custody, and until they're 18. So that's what really, at the end of it, all it boiled down to. It's like, I just want my kids. I'll give up everything else, but I need to have my, I have sole custody of my kids, and I need to be able to like plan for their futures, take care of them physically and emotionally. But as I said, I've not limited access in any way, and that's not because I'm altruistic or I'm Mother Teresa. And I haven't done that for my ex-husband. I've done this for the welfare of my children, because I think it's really important for them to still have access to their dad, still see their dad when they want to. So he, up until very recently, has been seeing them on a daily basis. But at the moment, we're down in New Zealand, so he's still overseas because of the COVID situation. He hasn't been seeing them. But in a regular arrangement, he would be seeing them at least once, if not twice a day.
Well, that's interesting. So I have full custody as well, and not by choice. So my ex-husband has a fiance and ended up having a 5th child. And a year ago, probably a week before our first lockdown in March in New Zealand, he decided that he was going to move to Queenstown. Goodbye, see you later. No consultation, bye-bye. So they would see him probably 3 times a year, and that's it. Yeah. So my children are nearly 19, 17, 15, and 12. How old are yours, Olivia?
Mine are 15, 13, the 2 girls, and then the boys are 10 and 9.
So I've got 2 boys and 2 girls as well. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Very similar situations.
Yes.
How did you both go about finding who you were, or like who you wanted to be after divorce happened to you? And how do you advise our community can do the same?
Well, I think, a lot of self-help. So, listening to journaling, for example, is really important. Meditation, self-help books like Radical Acceptance, podcasts, a lot of development that way. Actually sitting and reflecting on what did I used to be like? Who was the old me? Who was the old me before I got into this dysfunctional relationship? What was I like, as we talked about? What was my purpose? What was my identity then? And what is it going to be going forward? Sitting down and writing about all the wonderful attributes of yourself, or even asking friends, what are the great things about me? What am I good at? Focusing on your strengths. We've all got weaknesses, but focusing on your strength is really important. And actually putting down some goals. Where do I want to be in the future? Who do I want to be? Am I working in an area that I love, that I'm really passionate about? How am I as a parent? How can I, and as I touched on before, my parenting has got a lot better. I've become a better parent since I've left that relationship. How can I continue to work on that and become the best parent that I possibly can do to these children, since they're only in our lives for a certain period before they wander off all over the world? Those sort of things have really worked well for me. And it's coming back to, as Olivia pointed out, you have a small group of people who really love and cherish and care for you, and having your back and being supportive of you blossoming like a butterfly into who you are now is really important.
I love that. That's amazing. And so many amazing tips there. Thank you. How about you, Olivia?
I think for me, the way my marriage unraveled, there was a lot of betrayal, and there was a lot of hurt. So a key point for me when I divorced was I sat down and thought hard about, not changing. I decided that I did not want to change. I could feel, the whole process that I've been through, that I've been changing as a person. I was getting harder. I was closing myself off more, and I was feeling more negative about things. So I sat down and really, really thought, like, I'm not going to give this power to somebody else, to other parties in my life to change me and essentially who I am. I'm an open person, I'm a loving person, I'm a kind person, and I'm not going to allow this bad experience in my life to kind of change me. And I could feel that I was going down that track. And I did not want to be bitter. that was a huge thing. I wanted to just, you know, let go of it, you know, make myself be at peace with what had happened, not hold any animosity towards the people that I felt had hurt me. And I really wanted to note that, understand that, and really, really let it go, and not just talk about letting it go, not just talk about, oh, I'm fine with what they do, they can move on with their lives, or, you know, I'm fine with whatever happens in the future. I really worked very hard on letting that go, letting the anger go, letting the pain go, and then really for myself, not to become negative and cynical, and not to become very, very kind of toxic about the whole thing. So that was a huge part for me. Trying to find myself again, and find that trusting person, find that loving person, and allowing myself to open up to people. So for me, it was less of trying to find it was less of trying to find a direction in my career or direction in my life. It was more trying to make sure that the core of me did not change because I've been through this bitter kind of, you know, bad situation, that I wasn't going to become a different person, just committed to holding on to who I was, not allowing it to change me, and still finding a way. And it's not easy to trust again, to open your heart again, to love again. And that's actually, that was the hardest part for me. I think that was quite difficult, and that took a lot of work, and it really took a lot of support from friends around me as well to not allow me to fall into that kind of bitter kind of, like, you know, a situation where you feel like you're the, and it was very much like, no, this is not going to be the way it is. I'm going to be who I was. I'm going to move on. I'm going to be positive, and I'm not going to allow it to change.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the tips that I've got in one of my workbook tips for letting go, I've got, think about your view of the world and yourself. Let go of unresolved issues. Practice forgiveness.
Huge.
Yeah. Choose to focus on your strengths, focus on what you want, not what you don't want, and choose to be grateful for what you gained from the relationship, because there's always going to be some positives from that. And I tell clients to actually, you know, write down their story, and actually how might they reframe it. And I also get clients to write down their story and then actually rip it up or burn it, you know, because so many people get stuck in the story and can't get out of it.
They do, they relive it, and I think it can tar everything you do in the future if you're still living in that kind of negative mindset and you think that's what's going to happen to you, or that's the way you're going to be treated. It's very difficult to move beyond that.
That's right.
Really, and you're embracing forgiveness, not for other people. That's what took me a while to realize, that the forgiveness was really for me. You know, and once I forgave, I felt much better. I felt much happier. I had a talk a couple of months ago where somebody asked me what I would do differently, how would I change things, and what would I go back and do differently in my life. And I think it was that moment I really understood that everything had come full circle, and I was very, very happy because I could very confidently look at that person and say nothing. You know, in the sense that I would go through everything I went through again because I look at what I've gotten out of it, and that's the kids and who I am today. And I know that can sound a bit cliche and a bit, you know, like foo-foo and a bit practice, but it's not. It really isn't. I'm going to trade these 4 kids for anything. I wouldn't trade the lessons I've learned along the way for anything. I wish it hadn't been as painful, but then I wouldn't be who I am today, and the kids wouldn't be who they are today, and we wouldn't be the strong unit that we are today. So I wouldn't change things, but self-reflection, I think, has been important as well as part of the healing process. It's never one party. No matter how much you would like to sit back and just point the finger at somebody else, you know, ultimately the final step that makes things, that pushes things beyond the boundary of being able to be fixed may be taken by another party. But there was always something you can learn if you reflect and look at your kind of part in it, the role that you've played. And all of us have not, you know, we have something to learn from it, you know, something to improve ourselves with. There were definitely things in my marriage that I would do differently, things I learned, but I wouldn't have learned having not been in that situation.
Yeah, there's always,
and I think owning that and working on it and trying to move on from it has made me a better person as well.
And there's always faults on both sides. It's never one-sided. So Olivia, are you in another relationship now?
I'm moving on, yes.
Are you in another relationship? Yes. No?
Yeah, moving on, yes.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Oh,
How
God.
about you, Bridgette?
No, I'm not. No. I haven't met someone yet that I would actually, permanently want in my life, but that's fine. I've no rush,
No rush at all. And like, how do you guys feel about love and finding love now that you've been through all of that?
Oh, look, I would get married again in a heartbeat. It hasn't put me off at all.
For a long time, I wouldn't.
What's that?
For a long time, I wouldn't. For a long time, I just kept telling my best friend, the last thing I'll ever do, never let me get married again. Whatever you do. If I ring you in the middle of the night or I call you and I hit the ring, you tell me, don't do it.
Especially if you haven't signed a prenup either,
Oh, yeah.
I had a prenup first time around, but it didn't help. Did not help at all.
No?
No, now I'm proud to say, I'm pleased to say that I've moved on from that. Now I don't find the idea of getting married again horrific. I don't find it terrifying. Not smarter about it. I did go through a period of time where I thought it was an institution that I could not partake in again. But
that's right. That's very normal, though. That's very normal. No, so it's interesting when I've been separated nearly 7 years, and you get very used to being on your own. Because in the first instance, I remember jumping into a relationship pretty much, 10 months after I separated, because I felt lonely, and I thought I wanted to be in any relationship, regardless of whether it was a good relationship or not,
Yeah.
But over the years, you change and you grow, and you actually become at one with being on your own, and liking and loving spending time with just you. So, but no, I'm really keen to meet someone one day. I'm sure I will. I mean, I'm 50 next year, so I'm like,
You don't look it. You don't look it at all. Bloody hell, you give me hope.
It'll be a less traditional arrangement. It might not look like, how we thought it was going to look at
That's
our
right.
20s. It might look a bit different, but it's okay. That's something I've come to terms with as well. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to be happy. Life is about being happy. One of the things that I really focused on when I was unhappy in my marriage is I looked to the future of myself at about 85, lying on my deathbed going, I really regret my life. And that was another reason for me leaving my relationship, was the fact that I didn't want to be regretting anything, and, at the very least, the positives are, there's definitely positives with coming out of a bad marriage. And for you and me, Olivia, the first thing obviously is our 4 children each,
Yeah. That's why we appreciate the alone time.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. It's not much when we've got them full time all the time. Yeah.
My mum was asking me, what's wrong with your neck? What have you done to your neck? I said, I've burnt myself using the GHD because I had 2 boys having a war in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I love it. And if we have any questions, by the way, from people in the room, please feel free to ask them in the chat and we can read them out. And while we're waiting on that, do you guys have any final tips on, finding or being your best self, living your best life after all of this, other than what you've touched on?
No regrets. I think don't regret anything, and there's no point dwelling in the past. I think you go back to the past only to find key learning points, learning what you did that may not have been 100%, learning how you contributed to a situation. You may not have actively contributed to a situation, but sometimes inaction is enough to put you in a situation where you shouldn't be. So to learn to value yourself and then really live with no regrets. If it happened to you, it happened to you for a reason, and you're strong enough to figure it out, and you're strong enough to move on from it, and you're strong enough to be a happier, better person from it. And it's something that you can share with your children. It's a strength that you can give to them. And I see that with my kids every day. My son wrote something at school and I nearly cried. I saw it on a piece of paper, and they had to say, describe your mom. And he said, oh, my mom is Superman because my mom can do everything. And I thought to myself, there are days where you think you're not doing it right, and there's days that you think you can't cope. And then you realize you've got these little people looking at you, and they really think you're amazing, and they think you can do it all. And we can't do it all. We just have to do our best. We have to not beat ourselves up over the mistakes we've made. Don't live in the past, live towards the future, you know, and be happy, because I think that's the best kind of role model we can be for the children.
Yeah. And being happy thing. Life is just too short, you know, laugh lots, always find the positive and negatives, and just embrace life. You've got an opportunity to have a new start again. You know, you've had the courage to leave this relationship that wasn't good for you. So the world is, all the cliches, the world is your oyster. You know, go out there and make life what you want it to be, and be the person you want to be. Yeah.
Wow, I've just got chills as you guys were saying that. It's such meaningful, beautiful stuff, and so true, whether you're going through this or whether you're not, like just generally in life. I think that's a really nice place to finish. It doesn't look like we've got any questions, so could you please both share where people can find you online and how they can get in touch?
Sure. So my business is called Equal X's, so equal and then exes.com. And people can email me at Bridgette, Bridgette, at equalexes.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. If you or anyone that you know has is having issues in terms of their divorce and separation, then send them to me, because I can really help them get some sustainable and successful outcomes, and make sure that they come out in one piece positively at the end of the whole process.
Unlike Bridgette, I'm not an expert in this field. I don't have any expert advice or expert tips to give, but more than happy to chat to anybody who'd just like to have a chat. You know, somebody who feels a bit lost, who wants maybe some direction, some guidance, or maybe just wants to have a cup of coffee and then talk to somebody who's been through it. It's a scary time to navigate your kind of way through, and I know that because I did that myself. So if you just need just somebody to listen to your story, somebody to wipe a tear, somebody to give a shoulder, you can drop me a line. You can email me on ocll@yahoo.com, or you can find me on IG, Olivia Carla Ling. So that's OLIVIACARLALING, and you can just DM me through there. Or for more professional stuff, you can find me on LinkedIn, but that's more business related. But no problem. So just look for Betty. Betty knows where I am.
Yeah, and I'll post all these links in. I put down here, like the comments are there. But yeah, when we post that, I'll make sure that that's all there as well. But thank you so much to both of you. That was wonderful, and I'm sure this is going to help so many people. So thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and just your positivity as well. I think you're both real lessons, and it's been absolutely wonderful to have you on here.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Cool. Thanks, guys. And thanks to everyone for watching. I hope you tune into more inspirational talks and definitely connect with both of these wonderful women. Thank you, everyone. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.